Good afternoon. This is the Dvar Torah on Parshas Va Eschanan. It is the second Parsha of Sefer Devarim, and it has a fixed time in the year Jewish calendar. The first one is read. The Parshas Devarim is always the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av, which we're just arisen from a couple of days ago. And this, and in it is the Haftorah. It's the third of Haftorahs of admonition for Tisha B'Av. And now, this week, Parashat Va Eschanan is the first Parsha of this after Tisha B'Av, and the Haftorah, selection read from the Nevi'im, is the first of what's called the seven Haftorahs of consolation and not connected to the Parsha. And these seven Parshas, these seven Haftorahs, are all going to give us consolation because, look, we're rising from the ashes literally 2 days ago, a little over 2 days ago, we were sitting on the floor, mourning the loss of the temples and all the other tragedies that struck us. Now we're starting to move beyond that, and we need to be able to rise, and over the next 7 weeks, including the 4 weeks of Elul, prepare ourselves for the Day of Judgment on Rosh Hashanah. In fact, the month of Av really has two phases, that till Tisha B'Av, or the day or two after Tisha B'Av, and that's starting with Tu B'Av. I'm going to be giving a separate Dvar Torah Be'ezrat Hashem beginning of the week on the significance of Tu B'Av. In any event, this Parsha is also in more positive themes, even though Moshe is still, like I said, week's Parsha, all last 630s of his life, he's giving us admonition in different ways. But now we're getting stuff that's more positive, shows Hashem's love for us. And the seven Haftorahs of consolation, that's why it is called Shabbat Nachamu, means consolation. It opens literally with the word Vaetchnan. There's many perushim on it, what it means. Vaetchnan, Vaeschanan, new stuff in Ashkenaz pronunciation, and which literally means I implored. It has many other meanings, your whole commentaries, and the basic meaning is implored. Moshe implored Hashem, Moshe Hashem over 500 times that he be allowed, that Hashem revoked the decree and he be allowed into Eretz Israel. And he says, Ad Hashem, Master Hashem, name of Vaya, Natat Kulan, they wrote Aflecha El Gedasa El Yedeka V'Kazim Mishemayim Ba'aretz Asher Shem Maisim L'Gebreka. You've begun to show your servant in your greatness and your strong hand. What power there is in the heavens, those can perform according to your deeds. And according to your mighty acts. And then goes on to say, Avraha nad yirav el aretz tova asher nevidcha ahar tova zeh Lebanon. Let me cross, see there's the other side of Jordan, this good mountain in Lebanon. It then goes on to say, in Pasuk 26,
Tava Hashem Anoi Menachem Hoshma Ali Amer Ali Recha Tosef Dava Od Dava Zeh. Said, but Hashem became angry with me because of you. In Lamas, Hashem said to me, it's too much for you. Do not speak to me further about this matter. And then goes on to say he's going to see the land from Moab, but he's not going to go into it. There are many, many reasons that are given for that. I will discuss a couple. Moshe then goes on. He's telling the people they got to safeguard all the mitzvahs that he's given. He goes on some length of this, and he reminds them, don't fall and go worship idols, don't do other averas. And it goes on reminding Har Sinai, how there was a cloud over Har Sinai at the time of Matan Torah, how the mountain flamed, and how Hashem gave us, and reminds them they didn't see any likeness, and that they can't make any images. And Hashem became angry, it says, because of your deeds. But he said, beware of this. And Moshe warns that your children and grandchildren who have been in the land, you'll grow corrupt and make carved images. In other words, idol worship. And there's going to be a big price to be paid for that. And he said, I'm going to appoint heaven and earth to remind you that if you don't, you will not have length of days in the good land. You'll be exiled. And he says, and just summarize our history so much, that ultimately you will come back to him and you will return to him. And he says, has any other people ever heard the voice? Then goes on to say, in Pasuk 35, which I'm also going to get back to, Ata re'ed da'at ki Hashem hu Elokim ein od novado. You Hashem, you have been shown to know that Hashem, he is God, there is none besides him. Now, that's a very significant pasuk. And what was shown, that the worlds above and the worlds below, 7 worlds above and 7 worlds below, Rashi and others, all came together on Har Sinai with Hashem, to show them, in other words, what? That Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the creative name, is Elokim, the one of justice also, that they're all him, and there's none beside him. The Parsha then goes on to discuss that you have to remember that Hashem is the one who scared away the nations, and you shouldn't fear. He then sets aside 3 of the Ori Miklat cities of refuge. Why? Until they cross the Jordan and under Yeshua and conquer Eretz Israel, it's not going to not going to be useful, but it teaches us one should try to do as much of a mitzvah as possible, even if one cannot complete it. We should make our best efforts to do everything we're capable of doing. And he then goes on, after talking about the division of how Hashem put the 2 kingdoms of Sikon and Og in power, to destroy them. And it then goes on to talk about he gives over the Aseros Adibros again, the 10 Commandments, with some significant changes, additions actually. And he said that the people did not want to listen directly after the 2 commandments. The first 2 commandments, why? Because each time the Hashem was one of the souls want to go back to Hashem. Hashem had to push them into their body, back in their bodies. Now, they didn't want to go through it another 8 times, but think of this. This was a defect. If they had, they could have heard all of the 10 commandments from Hashem. And moreover, if they had, they would have been on such a high spiritual level, they would have never succumbed to the Ego Zahav. He then goes into Shema Yisrael and the first paragraph of Shema, and then reminds us that all the things we inherited, thanks to Hashem, because we didn't build them or deal with them. And he then tells them how they cannot worship idols, how they can't make a covenant with them. And he finishes with the idea that whoever safeguards it will be observe his commandments for 1,000, paid for 1,000 generation. It tells that you must observe the commandments. Now, I would like to go into 2 questions here. And I think in a way I'm going to show they're connected. Why is it that Moshe got turned down by God? He was the greatest of the Nevi'im. Why couldn't Hashem relented? In fact, he said Hashem didn't relent because he got angry for you, meaning the people, and he did it for them. Now, I would like to go to the pasuk, Hashem Elokim Ein Milvado. There is Hashem, he is king. You have been shown that there is only he. There is none other. Hashem is Elokim, his creative name, his name of justice go together. Now, this is a very powerful statement. It has many levels of depth, but I'd like to share one concept, is that what it is telling us, everything comes from Hashem, that God is everything, all creations, nothing moves in this world but for him. Now, this constitutes a segula, a help. This was written first by Rav Chaim Volozhin, the Rosh Yeshiva of the Volozhin Yeshiva, first of the modern Lithuanian yeshivas in Europe. He was a student of the Gra. Now, if one totally believes this, and says it with all his or her fiber and every fiber of their body, and with all the effort, nothing will affect them. We see, it's a segula, we'll see that in many incidences. First one of the great rebellion of one of the great yeshivas in Europe, went through Nazi-occupied Europe, dressed like religious Jews, him and the sons, and they were invisible effectively to the Nazis, had all kinds of miracles. And when they got to the border between Russia and Germany, this is before the Germans invaded Russia in June of 1941, German guards, even though it was noonday, were asleep standing up, which was a mace itself. If their commander had caught them, they would have been shot on the spot probably. And we got to the other side, which was controlled by the Soviet Union and run by the NKVD, which was the predecessor to KGB. In other words, the secret police. Normally, they saw a person, people dressed like them, they would have taken them, and best, if they weren't shot on the spot, they would have been sent to Siberia and slave labor camps for many years. What happened instead? There was no inspection. They didn't check the wagon to see who was back there. And they raised the gates and saluted them and sent them on their way. Again, this is, of course, they were reciting this pasuk with every fiber of their concentration.
And since then, it's become a segula that's helped many people in many situations. And it's been responsible for segula, for miraculous rescues from people from Chaylim and Sahel, Israeli army, and many other cases. Now, when I was studying this week's Parsha with a chabrusa of mine, he asked me a question: why this particular pasuk? Because we say later on in Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, same Parsha. Hear, O Israel, Hashem is our God, and then Hashem is one. What does that mean? Currently, we recognize him as God, and we recognize him as the all-powerful Master. At the end of days, after Mashiach comes, the whole world will recognize his unity. Now, the question is, why isn't that? And Mike Caruso came up with a very interesting answer. He said that talks about the present and the future. We know he's God now, and eventually everybody will. It's not one time, it's got historical implications too. Yet, if you look at the other pasuk, where he called it mindfulness, spiritual mindfulness, we're keeping in mind at this moment, Hashem is everywhere, and Hashem controls everything, and no harm can come to us. And because of that, we've totally focused on Hashem in the present moment. Something we should not only get from situations of life and death, but even when we're learning and doing mitzvahs, should keep in mind Hashem at all times. Now, and therefore, we see that Hashem loves us in all circumstances, will take care of us whether we're on his good side or we're doing evil. And that also goes back to the initial pasukim, because I got a question. Why didn't Hashem, God, let Moshe in? He's capable of doing anything. And Moshe's answer is even stranger. He didn't do it because and said, Hashem became angry with me because of you. He did not listen. Hashem said, it's too much for you. And not continue to speak further about this matter. Now, what is going on here? And what we see is Moshe's apparent reason for not being allowed, and as Aaron wasn't, when Hashem said in the 40th year, and the whole Bnei Israel were demanding water, he said, speak to the rock, don't break it. Instead, they broke the rock, water came out. But Hashem said, because you haven't sanctified me, I am not letting you come in. Now, what was going on here? Because I'd like to ask the question the other way. Two questions. What would have happened if he had spoken to the rock instead of breaking the rock? There's many commentaries on this. But what would have happened? Hashem would have been elevated, sanctified even higher in the eyes of the people. Moshe would have gone in. The entry into Eretz Israel would have been miraculous. In other words, even with Yeshua, even though it was close, there still was some battles. Not that we suffered many casualties, but there's still some natural element. We had to make the effort. If Moshe had gone in and he had sanctified, the people had been sanctified Hashem properly, they would have been a miraculous entry. And if there had been a miraculous entry, the location of the temple would have been discovered immediately, not 400 years later. The first second the temple would have become, Moshe would in effect have become Mashiach, the king. And that's one thing. And it would have been the ultimate redemption. Now, that did not happen. And we didn't go in that way. Because the people hadn't sanctified Hashem the way they were supposed to. because of what Moshe and Aaron didn't do, as well as what they did with the rock. And therefore, something else came up. What would happen if Moshe had gone in anyway? If Moshe had gone in anyway, when one enters, Hashem gives open miracles, the people are held to a much higher level. Since they weren't at the correct level because of what happened with that incident, they would have been judged more harshly than they were with the entering of the temple. Then they would have, with the way they went in with Yeshua, which was not totally miraculous. Now, what's the implications of this? The implication of this is the temple still would have been discovered, and later on, when the people sinned, because they weren't at the right level they were supposed to be, what would have effectively happened is Hashem would have taken his anger out on the people, because the temple built, basically that built by Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't have been destroyed, and the people would have to be destroyed, and Hashem's whole purpose of creation would not come into it, would not be there. So because of his love for us, even when we strayed, he didn't let Moshe come in. Now, what about if Moshe hadn't come in as the leader Yeshua had? As one of my teachers, Rav Nachman Buhlman Zichron Tzaddik, pointed out, even if he just come in as a regular person, the temple would have still been, the location temple would have still been discovered. That would have been miraculous, and whole problem would go again. We see something similar with David Melech. Now, the traditional reason why they said that David Melech could not build the temple was because he had spilled blood in wars. Now, according to the Midrash Sachutav, not the prophet Nasan came to him again and said, "Don't feel bad. That's not the reason you're not going in. The temple can't be built by you, because your blood that you spilled in the wars was Hashem's command. It was like the sprinkling of blood from the korbanot on the Mizbeach." If that is the case, a temple built by you couldn't be destroyed. And when the people are going to sin later, you'd have the same problem. Well, what about Shlomo HaMelech? Shlomo was not going at the same level as his father, even though he was the wisest of all men at the time. He wasn't at the same level. So in other words, Hashem wants to always loved us and wanted to maintain us. And when he did have to, for our own good, take out his anger on us, he took it out on, even though it hurt some of us, he took it out on the building, the base of Mikdash itself, and not on the temple, not on us. And the same with the second temple. And so, in other words, Hashem always still loves us, even if he has to be in the point of disciplining us. And so therefore, when it says Hashem Elohim, we should keep that in mind. Even when we're going through the challenging times we are now, Hashem loves us. Everything that is happening is Hashem's will, and that he's leading us as far, even though we can't see the reasons, it's all leading us towards soon may the ultimate redemption come, and Mashiach B'mehera Yemenu speedily in our days. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.